Eat up, Elijah. You have a big day.
Thanks, Maya. I'm just so tired.
I know, but you have to push through.
Maya Johnson was pouring cereal for her little brother when the first SUV rolled onto her street.
Good
Then
morning,
the
Miss
second,
Johnson.
then 8 more,
We need to talk.
black paint gleaming under the morning sun, engines idling in perfect formation outside a house that had never once, in 24 years, drawn this kind of attention. 12 men in dark suits stepped out at the same time, like they'd rehearsed it, and the man leading them, tall, gray at the temples, said her name into the quiet street like he already owned it. Maya Johnson. 6 months earlier, Maya didn't know she'd just fed the most dangerous secret in Charlotte, North Carolina. If you're new here, consider subscribing, and let's go back to where this all started. Charlotte in the fall smells like rain on warm asphalt, and Maya's mornings always started the same way. Up at 5:30, coffee in a chipped mug that used to be her mother's. A quick check on her 14-year-old brother, Elijah, still asleep with his headphones tangled around his neck. Then, a 10-hour shift as a home health aide, driving between 3 different clients across the east side of the city, changing dressings, reading medication charts, holding hands that shook too much to hold a fork. Maya had been the head of their household since she was 19, since the night their mother's heart simply stopped in her sleep and left 2 kids and a stack of unpaid bills behind. She never talked about it much. She just worked. She got Elijah to school, kept the lights on, and told herself that surviving quietly was its own kind of dignity. Every evening, walking home from the bus stop on Freedom Drive, she passed a shuttered pharmacy with a wooden bench out front, and on that bench, more nights than not, sat an old man. Nobody on the block knew his name. He wore the same gray coat no matter the weather, kept a small canvas bag beside him like it held everything he owned, and never once asked anyone for anything. Maya noticed him the way you notice a crack in a sidewalk you walk over every day. Small, easy to step around, easy to forget. Until the night she didn't step around it. She was carrying a plate of food home from a client who always sent her off with extra, and something made her stop in front of the bench instead of walking past it. She didn't say much. She just held the plate out, wrapped in foil, still warm. He looked up at her for a long moment before he took it, like he was trying to remember what it felt like to be handed something without a catch attached. "Thank you, young lady," he said. Quiet, careful, like the words themselves cost him something. She didn't think much of it that first night, but the next evening, she found herself packing an extra plate before she left her last client's house. And the evening after that. Within 2 weeks, it wasn't a decision anymore. It was just what she did. She never asked his name, and he never offered it. Elijah teased her about it when she got home a little later than usual. "You got a boyfriend on Freedom Drive now?" he'd say, and she'd swat him with a dish towel and tell him to mind his homework. One of her neighbors, an older woman named Dorothy, who'd lived on the block for 30 years, pulled her aside one afternoon and told her to be careful. "You don't know that man," Dorothy said. "Sweet as you are, sweet don't always keep you safe." Maya nodded and kept bringing the food anyway. There was one thing she noticed, though, that she couldn't quite explain. Sometimes, when a black SUV drove down Freedom Drive, nothing special, just a car like any other, the old man would go still. Not scared, exactly, braced. Like a man listening for a sound he hoped never to hear again. She filed it away without asking. Some people carried things they weren't ready to set down, and she understood that better than most. It was a rainy night in late October when everything started to shift. The rain was coming down hard enough that most people would have kept walking, but Maya sat down on the wet bench next to him and ate with him instead of just dropping the plate and moving on. For a while, neither of them said much. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke. "Walter," he said. "My name is Walter Ashford." He said it slowly, testing the shape of it in his own mouth, like a man checking whether an old key still fit a lock he hadn't touched in years. Maya turned the name over. "Ashford," she repeated. "Like the Ashford Group?" Walter went completely silent. The rain kept falling, and for the first time since she'd started bringing him food, Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach, the sense that she'd just asked a question that mattered more than she understood. That night, after she got Elijah to bed, she sat at the kitchen table with her old laptop and searched the name. The Ashford Group came up first, a logistics and real estate empire headquartered right there in Charlotte, worth billions, built from nothing over 4 decades by a man named Walter Ashford. And then the second result, an obituary. Walter Ashford, presumed dead after a boating accident off the Carolina coast 11 years earlier. No body was ever recovered. The company had been run by his son, Marcus Ashford, ever since. Maya sat there staring at the screen until the laptop's fan clicked off from inactivity, and the kitchen went quiet around her. The next evening, she went back to the bench, and she brought it up carefully, gently, the way you'd approach a wounded animal. Walter's face changed the second she said the word Ashford a second time. He told her she was mistaken, that it was a common name, nothing more, and then he gathered his canvas bag and walked away faster than she'd ever seen him move. He didn't come back to the bench for 3 days. On the second of those 3 days, Maya noticed a sedan parked across the street from her house that she didn't recognize. A man sat inside it, not doing anything, just watching. She told herself it was nothing. Charlotte was a big city. People parked on quiet streets all the time. But the sedan was still there the next morning, and the morning after that. The man's name, though Maya wouldn't learn it for a while yet, was Daniel Cole, a private investigator who specialized in finding people who very much did not want to be found. He'd been hired 6 weeks earlier by Marcus Ashford himself, after an anonymous tip suggested his father might still be alive, living somewhere on the east side of the city. Cole had spent those 6 weeks working the description backward. Elderly white male, distinctive scar above the left ear, a habit of flinching at black vehicles. He'd found 3 false leads before he found Freedom Drive, and once he found it, he didn't stop watching. When Walter finally came back to the bench on the 4th evening, he looked different. Thinner. His hands trembled slightly when he unwrapped the food Maya handed him. He asked her, quietly, to promise him something. "Promise me you'll never repeat that name to anyone else," he said. "Not to your brother, not to your neighbors, no one." Maya promised. She meant it when she said it. She had no way of knowing that promise was already too late to keep. While Maya was making that promise on a rain-slicked bench on Freedom Drive, 12 miles away, inside a glass-walled office on the 40th floor of the Ashford Group's headquarters, Marcus Ashford was finishing the final terms of a deal 11 years in the making. Marcus had inherited the company the year his father disappeared, and he had spent every year since proving, to the board, to the market, to himself, that he deserved it. He was sharp, controlled, and terrified in a way he never let anyone see, terrified that the empire his father built would somehow slip through his hands the way everything else important in his life seemed to. In 4 days, he was set to finalize the sale of the company's core logistics division to a rival executive named Preston Whitfield, a deal that would make Marcus personally wealthier than he'd ever been and would, quietly, strip the pensions of nearly 6,000 employees who'd spent decades building that division in the first place. It was the kind of deal his father would never have signed, which was exactly why Marcus needed his father to stay gone. When Daniel Cole walked into his office that afternoon with a folder of surveillance photos, gas station footage, a grainy image of an elderly man's hands, his gait, the pale line of an old scar above his left ear, Marcus went very quiet. He studied the photos for a long time before he spoke. "You're certain," he said. "As certain as I can be without a direct confirmation," Cole answered. Marcus set the folder down on his desk, like it was something that might go off if handled wrong. He had built 11 years of his life, his identity, his entire sense of who he was, on the foundation that his father was gone, and now that foundation was sitting on a wooden bench outside a shuttered pharmacy, 3 miles from where Marcus had grown up. He told himself, later that night, that what he decided to do next was about protecting the company. He told Cole to assemble a team, quietly, and bring the old man in before anyone else could confirm what Cole had already found. Not to hurt him. Just to contain the situation until Marcus decided what to do with it. He didn't let himself use the word he was actually thinking. Retrieve. As if his father were a misplaced asset instead of a man. Back on Freedom Drive, Maya noticed the sedan had become 2 sedans. And then, one afternoon, Daniel Cole's car was no longer parked near the pharmacy. It was parked outside her own house. That was the moment fear stopped being a feeling in the back of her mind and became something she had to act on. She went straight to the bench that evening and told Walter what she'd seen, and this time she didn't let him deflect. She sat down, looked him in the eye, and told him she wasn't leaving until he told her the truth. All of it. No matter how much it cost either of them. Walter finally broke. 11 years ago, he told her, he had discovered that his son had been meeting secretly with a rival executive, negotiating behind the board's back to sell off the company's core division in a deal that would gut the retirement funds of thousands of employees who'd given the company their working lives. Walter tried to stop it. He went to the board. He threatened to go public. And in the weeks that followed, in ways he still couldn't fully explain even to himself, he found himself cut out of decisions, isolated, and increasingly afraid, not just for the company, but for what his own son might be capable of protecting the deal. So he did the only thing that felt like it might actually work. He staged his death in a boating accident, disappeared entirely, and told himself his silence would protect the employees better than a public war ever could, because a public war would tank the company's stock and cost those same employees their jobs overnight. He had spent 11 years watching from a distance, homeless by choice more than circumstance, believing that as long as he stayed hidden, the deal his son wanted couldn't move forward without a body, a will, a clean legal transfer of ownership that never quite came. He hadn't accounted for one thing. 11 years was a long time for a company to find workarounds. Maya sat with that story until the streetlights came on, and when she finally spoke, her voice was steady in a way that surprised even her. Hiding didn't stop him, she said. It just gave him 11 years to figure out how to finish it without you. Walter didn't have an answer for that. He just looked, for the first time since she'd known him, like a man who understood exactly how badly his plan had failed. 2 days later, the danger stopped circling and started closing in directly. Elijah came home from school pale and quiet, and it took Maya 20 minutes of gentle pressing before he admitted a man had followed him for 3 blocks after the bus dropped him off, staying just far enough back to seem accidental, close enough that Elijah noticed anyway. Maya felt something in her chest go cold and then hard all at once. This wasn't about an old man on a bench anymore. It was about her family, in her house, on her street. That night, Walter told her he had to disappear again, immediately, to keep her and Elijah safe. He'd start walking that same night and not stop until he was somewhere no one would think to look. Maya said no. Running is what got us here, she told him. You ran for 11 years, and all it did was give him time. If you disappear again, they'll still be watching this house, because now they know I know. The only way any of us is actually safe is if you stop hiding and make it impossible for them to make you disappear quietly. It took her most of the night to convince him, but by morning, they had a plan. Walter still had one name from his old life he trusted absolutely, a former assistant who'd helped him manage his personal files decades earlier, long retired, long out of Marcus's orbit. Through her, Maya and Walter reached a financial journalist named Rebecca Hayes, someone who'd spent years publicly questioning the circumstances of Walter Ashford's disappearance and had never fully bought the boating accident story. Rebecca didn't need much convincing. She'd been waiting 11 years for exactly this call. The plan was simple in concept and terrifying in practice. Instead of hiding, Walter would reveal himself publicly, on his own terms, before Marcus's men could take him quietly off the street. Rebecca would be there with a camera crew, ready to broadcast the moment it happened, so that whatever Marcus tried to do next, he'd have to do it in front of the entire country. They didn't know exactly when Marcus would move. They only knew it would be soon. It was soon. Maya was pouring cereal for Elijah on a Tuesday morning when the first SUV rolled onto her street. Then, the second. Then 8 more, engines idling in a formation too precise to be anything but planned. 12 men in dark suits stepped out. And Marcus Ashford himself walked to the front of the group, said Maya's name like he already owned the ground she stood on, and told her calmly that he was there for the man staying in her home. What Marcus didn't know, what none of his 12 men knew, was that this wasn't an ambush anymore. It was a stage. Walter walked out onto the porch before Marcus finished his sentence. No canvas bag, no flinching at the black vehicles this time. He stood at the top of the steps and looked at his son directly for the first time in 11 years. Marcus froze. The men behind him froze. And from across the street, a camera that had been running for the last 4 minutes kept rolling as Rebecca Hayes stepped out from behind a parked van with a microphone already live. "Marcus," Walter said, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "I think it's time we talked. All of us. In front of everyone." Marcus's carefully built composure cracked in real time. He'd come expecting to find a confused, frightened old man he could quietly load into a car. Instead, he found his father standing upright, unafraid, and a journalist broadcasting the entire encounter live. Walter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He spoke directly into Rebecca's microphone and told the world that he was alive, that he had staged his own disappearance 11 years earlier after discovering his son had tried to secretly sell off the company's core division and strip the pensions of thousands of employees, and that he was reclaiming his seat on the board, effective immediately, to make sure that deal never went through. Marcus stood on the sidewalk in front of his own men, his father, and a live camera, and understood, all at once, that there was no version of this moment he could control anymore. Something in him finally broke, not into rage, but into something quieter and more honest. He wasn't a cartoon villain plotting from the shadows. He was a son who had spent 11 years convincing himself that burying the truth was the same thing as protecting what his father built, and who was only now realizing how much that conviction had cost him. He didn't argue. He didn't order his men to do anything. He just stood there, in front of the cameras, and, for the first time in over a decade, said his father's name out loud. "Dad," he said, "nothing else, just that." The deal with Preston Whitfield collapsed within the week, once news broke that Walter Ashford was alive and had reclaimed his position on the board. Thousands of employees who never knew how close they'd come to losing their pensions went on with their lives, never fully aware of the bench on Freedom Drive where the whole thing had quietly started to unravel. Walter didn't return to the company to punish his son. He returned to finish protecting what he'd tried to protect 11 years earlier, and, slowly, to rebuild something with Marcus that neither of them fully understood yet, but both of them, for the first time in over a decade, were willing to try. He also did one more thing. Quietly, without asking Maya's permission first, he set up a trust in her name and Elijah's. Not as a reward, he told her, but as a thank you for the only thing anyone had given him in 11 years without expecting anything back. Maya didn't quit her job. She still drives the same routes across the east side of Charlotte, still checks medication charts and holds hands that shake too much to hold a fork on their own. But some evenings now, instead of walking home past an empty bench, she stops by an actual house, a warm one, where an old man who finally has his name back opens the door before she even knocks. "Thank you, young lady," he still says, every time. Except now it isn't the voice of a stranger with nothing left to lose. It's the voice of a man who got his whole life back because someone once handed him a plate of food and never once asked what it would cost her. If a story like this moved you, there's more where it came from. Subscribe if you're new here, and before you go, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching this from.